So first and foremost, Jazakallah for sharing your views with us on this. I think it'll also be very useful for us to perhaps understand if there was a historical perspective where, so you've spoken about a situation where it is difficult, you've spoken about a situation where things aren't as clear as it is. Were there ever a period in history in the past that we had similar situations where, I don't know, rulers actually used this as leverage to consolidate power and so on, just for us to understand if there's also something that we can also learn from history?
I think there must have been some similar conditions, maybe not as bad as it is today, because today political power is enormous. It's so central, it's centralized, highly centralized, and it's those in power have a monopoly over extreme forms of oppression. Yet, in history, there were times when the Ummah was not in a very, very good shape, and pilgrims were in danger. One of the most famous cases was that of Al-Qaramita. Al-Qaramita, where it was a community of an extreme sect of Shi'ism in Eastern Arabia, in what is today Bahrain, or around that, or Eastern Saudi Arabia, really. It's Eastern Arabia. And they invaded Mecca during the time of pilgrims and even removed the black stone, Al-Hajar al-Aswad. And they killed so many people during Hajj. Even earlier, when there was the fitna in the early days after the death of Muawiyah, and the controversy about who is entitled to rule the Muslims, etc. And a number of the younger Sahaba, Al-Husayn ibn Ali, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, decided to rebel against the status quo because to them, and this was the opinion, by the way, of the majority of the Muslims at the time, that the change that happened wasn't legitimate, that you kill shura and turn governance into some form of a hereditary monarchic system. So Abdullah ibn Zubayr decided to establish a proper khilafah in Hijaz. And the Umayyads sent Al-Hajjaj to quell his rebellion or to force him back under their rule. And there was fighting inside Mecca to the extent that the Kaaba was stormed and was bombed. And Abdullah ibn Zubayr was killed and crucified even. So these some heinous crimes were committed at times, actually, and that's because of this attempt by certain individuals to deny the Ummah its right to governance. We've had this problem all along, but of course, at times, a certain settlement was reached and there was peace and tranquility for a while. Yet today, we have a unique situation in which these places that are so dear to every Muslim are controlled by a government that is actually fighting against Islam, not for Islam. And this is the most terrible thing that is happening. Today, billions of dollars are spent by the Saudi and the UAE governments around the world to suppress Muslim du'at, Muslim preachers, Muslim scholars, Muslim activists, and to undermine their organizations and their projects. So it's really a terrible situation, and that will inevitably impact on how Hajj is treated, or how the pilgrims are treated when they go to Hajj.
So, you mentioned that during the 70s, there existed the freedom for Muslims to express their state of affairs during Hajj, which you've clearly pointed out, which does not exist in whatever form. So, is there possibility of the political environment to gradually change? Are you hopeful of this? Maybe I know one has to take steps to enforce change, but do you see any cause for optimism?
Of course, well, we cannot lose hope at all. This is the whole idea of our existence as Muslims. We don't live just to have a nice house, a nice job, and a good salary, and whenever we are free or tired of this luxurious life, we go on holiday somewhere, enjoy ourselves. This is not our life as Muslims. Our life as Muslims is supposed to be a continuous struggle. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes as the tadafa, the continuous interplay, the push and pull between right and wrong, between good and evil. And we need to be on the side of good. And as there were times in history when things were very bad and then things improved, inshallah, I'm hopeful. And this is part of the struggle. And that's why there are people in prison today. The people who are in prison because they perform amru bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. So there is something going on. And when I see the sacrifices made by the people of Gaza, I am full of hope. I'm full of optimism that yes, things, inshallah, very soon will get better.
So, I'm quite keen on also taking your view on something that had happened in 2018. If you recall, the General Secretary of the Union of Tunisian Imams, they called upon the boycott of the Hajj, and in 2019, the Grand Mufti of Libya also issued a similar fatwa. So, the reasons was, the complicity of the Saudi regime in the killing of Muslim scholars and activists. So, I know you've touched upon this, but it'll be very interesting to get your view and opinion about this as to the bit about boycott of Hajj, which is a very, very, very contentious thing to say, given that it's such an important pillar of our faith.
Yes, I think there are good reasons for these people to call for the boycott of Hajj, because the situation is really rather bad.
Worse now, you mean?
It's much worse. It's much worse, getting worse. There are tens of thousands of Muslim activists and scholars in Saudi jails today. Can you imagine? Let alone those who are forced to be to stay away from their country because they cannot go back. I mean, the people still remember what happened to Jamal Khashoggi, my friend, who was dismembered in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in 2018. Actually, he was with me just hours before this happened to him, because before he went into the consulate to get a piece of paper for his second marriage, and they killed him and dismembered him. It's a terrible regime in Saudi Arabia, and that regime is not only persecuting people inside Saudi Arabia who are defending truth and justice. It is actually involved in a warfare against Islam around the world. Imagine. And they are supposed to be the custodians of the two holiest mosques on the face of the earth. So yes, I understand the point of view of these scholars who think that probably if people boycotted Hajj, and if that boycott worked, it might bring pressure to bear on them. Now, but I am of the opinion that it is probably not within us to tell people who have not performed the farida, the obligation, not to go to Hajj if they are able to go to Hajj, because it's still a must. So I prefer to associate with those who say you don't go for the second time. Like if you've performed Umrah and if you've performed Hajj, there is no point in continuing to go there when you know that the money you are paying are landing in the pockets of Ibn Saud, empowering him further. I think this is the idea behind it.
So, there is this general feeling that the majority of our Ummah has, a lot of people say this and very vocally left, our brethren, sisters, children in Gaza to suffer, and including the countries with the haram. So, would our Hajj be accepted? I mean, I know it's when we have not taken responsibility, we've not done enough. I know it's more than a theological question. Not only is it a theological, it's also an emotional one. I was wondering, was it something that you have pondered on?
Well, seeing our brothers being butchered, our brothers and sisters being butchered in Gaza, it really breaks our hearts, and especially when we feel there is very little we are able to do. I mean, whatever we do is really nothing. It counts for nothing compared to them giving their lives and giving their comfort and suffering the way they are suffering. And when you see these governments, these Arab governments, including the Saudi government, actually getting their own media to attack the people of Gaza rather than to sympathize with them. You see, the majority of the people of Saudi Arabia, the majority of the people around the Arab world and beyond the Arab world are with the people of Gaza. Make no mistake about this. But these governments have their hypocrites, have their agents who work for them, and they use their powerful media tools, whether mainstream media or social media, in order to distort the image of the people of Gaza and their jihad and their struggle. So it's valid for people to ask this question. I think it is valid. If you ask me myself, I wouldn't go to Hajj. But of course, I say this easily because I've been to Hajj twice. But it's like someone who is going to have a wedding when we have a massacre next door, and then decide, oh by Allah, I cannot hold a party and have a dance and express all the happiness because I'm being wedded while our people are being slaughtered. So I'm going instead to donate the money to Gaza and have a quiet wedding. See, people can, instead of paying so much money to go to Hajj in these circumstances, probably paying the money to aid the people of Gaza bears a greater reward. Perhaps, I mean, that's a very valid point that people need to think about. And let's hope that Allah gives us more time in life and things will improve in that part of the world, and people can perform Hajj in much better circumstances.
I mean, one final question, if I may, and this is, a bit broad brushed also, but what do you think that Ummah can do further unity during this exceptionally difficult period?
I think Gaza is giving us the opportunity to do a lot and to unite ourselves. We need a cause to unite over, and I've seen not only the Muslims, I've seen the world change because of Gaza. And for me as a Muslim, of course, I'm a Palestinian, even I'm an Arab, I'm a Palestinian, so probably I'm even in a different situation. But generally, as a Muslim, when your brothers are suffering, that's a cause for you. It's a cause for me. I need to do something about it. And we need to be in the forefront in all these efforts, in all these moves. Students in particular, I've been to some campuses, the encampments. I've been to King's College and I've been to Birmingham. But I hear stories which makes me feel a bit sorry that some of our young Muslim students do not believe that this is a priority. They do not take part in the activities in these encampments. We should be at the forefront. We should encourage others. I mean, there are now Christian students, Jewish students, communist students that are people of all orientations, of all backgrounds, that on the basis of their humanity, they come to the aid of Gaza, each in his own or her her own way. We, the Muslims, Muslim men and women, the young men and women, the students, should be at the forefront.
There was one thing that that prompted a bit of a question when so the second last one is that some scholars have actually earlier given the opinion that not a compromise, but a possible solution would be for an international board of scholars, representative of the global Ummah, be given the responsibility of managing, the Kaaba, the Haramain, rather than the way it is currently now, because it's a kingdom, it's a family. What's your opinion about that? Will that be a first step, or the first way to actually tackle this?
The problem is how are we going to implement it? That's the problem. You have a regime that is in charge, that has the support and the protection of the Americans, and it has had this for the past 70 years or more, and they are in charge. They took over Hijaz from the Ottomans. The Hijaz was under the Ottomans before the Saudis came from Najd and took over. And not all the time. I mean, the Saudis were not that bad all the time. Actually, it's just more recently, the past 20 years, I would say, they've been getting bad, and they've been getting worse by the day. But if you come up with an idea, no matter how beautiful that idea sounds, you have to think of how to implement it. What is the mechanism? We have the United Nations today. It's a brilliant idea that you have a club of all the nations, and they can meet and they can discuss, and the General Assembly of the United Nations seldom goes wrong. But whatever they agree on cannot be implemented, because the Security Council exists there, and it is the one that has the tools and the power to implement or not implement. So yeah, I understand that this idea that, let's have an international commission of some sort to oversee Hajj for the Muslims. How is it going to work? Never work.
Okay. I think we can wrap it up now, Dr. Azzam. Fine, all right. I'd like to ask anybody if they've got, there's a few people who are still typing, so are you okay to take the last question?
Yes, no problem.
You hope? Okay, fine. So the question that we have is, I understand that the money we're spending on the Hajj and Umrah are going, in the pockets of the government, but as you've mentioned, that if one person has performed the Umrah Hajj already once in their lifetime, then what's your thoughts from an Islamic point of view? If they're keen to, visit again and make some good deeds. And I know you made the point about, making use of the money that you would have otherwise spent on other projects. But it's just the question. I think a lot of people will also be troubled by religious theological rulings that support that, because there's this feeling, because it comes off as being very activist driven and political too.
Well, you see, people can issue fatwas on these matters, but I don't think it is a question of fatwa. It's a question of conviction. I mean, what do I believe to be more appropriate? To go to Hajj and spend £10,000, much of that money going into the pockets of the Al Saud, or donate that money to a noble cause like helping our brothers and sisters in Gaza, hopefully soon after they have peace again, rebuild their lives. I mean, which is better? I would say it is more important than performing Hajj, rescuing a Muslim in need, supporting a Muslim in need. Yes, that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala associated Hajj with ability. And there is room here. There is room for maneuver, that if there are priorities, if you have someone in the family who is sick, they need an operation. And I know that here in this country we're covered by NHS, etc. But it could be very serious, and you cannot wait for an NHS queue, long queue, and you want to take them to a private hospital and have them operated on. Now, which is better, to save their lives and end their agony, or go to Hajj? This is how people need to think about it. And the people of Gaza who are being butchered by the Zionists are our brothers and sisters. They are members of our family, our big family. So if you think of it this way, you will be able to answer the question for yourself. You don't need a fatwa. You don't need someone to issue you a fatwa.
Understood. So, Dr. Azzam, I just wanted to let you know that, we're going to invite you to pray for we have with us a few of our volunteers, members who are actually performing Hajj for the very first time, to also pray their Hajj is Mabrur. We've had the opportunity to say hello to them for a few minutes, but we seek for you to also pray for them. We want you to ask as we close, as an organization, what are your final thoughts about what we can do here in the UK to help with the cause in Palestine?
I think there is still a lot we can do, because we Muslims are doing less than what we are supposed to do. As I mentioned to you earlier, I've traveled across the country. I've seen the sort of activism. There are many Muslims involved, but there are a lot more non-Muslims involved. And that's because there are certain individuals in our community who are under the impression that this is not a priority. We need to learn the true Islam, the proper Islam, and not be influenced by some deviant sects or schools of thought, or some scholars who issue fatwas for despotic rulers. You, in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, each of us as an individual is responsible for his or her deeds, for his or her decisions. And you need to really be sure about what you're doing. So I think we need to develop this activism further. And we, the Muslims, should lead the world in establishing a global anti-Zionism movement, same as the anti-apartheid movement that existed in the 70s and the 80s, and that contributed to the end of the apartheid regime in South Africa. We need something similar for the world. And now Gaza is giving us the opportunity to do this. So I would urge the Muslim young men and women, Muslim parents, to work along these lines and to encourage more and more Muslims to be involved in the activism for Palestine.
Thank you very much, Dr. Azzam, for your time, and we say Jazakallah alf khairan for your thoughts, for your prayers, and for being with us today, sharing with us your views on a subject that is close to our heart, and at the very moment quite topical too. And this has been a very new way of actually looking at, when I say new, I say a very different way of actually looking at it, where previously Hajj was, not previously, but Hajj has also been seen as a ritual and ending at that, whereas it is actually much, much bigger and is a massive part of our identity. With these words, I would like to thank you on behalf of everybody at Strive, and thank all those who have also joined us today from all across the country. We would now declare the end of our session, and we say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you and to everybody who has joined.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Fi amanillah.
Barakallah.
Amanillah.